Thank you for the kind introduction to Professor Kubo. And I am very thankful for the Sophion Bioscience company and board member for giving me the opportunity to talk my result here. I will talk about the the recent work on two-pore channels. So two-pore channels, TPCs, are member of voltage-gated cation channel superfamily. And they are mainly expressed in the intercellular organelle membrane endosome and lysosome, in which they permeate sodium or calcium ion. So, and they are distinct calcium store from the ear. So the activation of TPCs initiates the calcium signaling. So this is important molecule. And TPC3 can be expressed in the plasma membrane. So for detailed analysis, we worked on these channels. And pharmacological, in the pharmacological aspect, these channels are important for the for preventing the viral infection, including Ebola virus or SARS-CoV-2, because the TPC can regulate the function of the endosome and the lysosomes. So here's the molecular structure of TPCs. They are 12 transmembrane proteins, and they are composed of 2 lipids, and each of which corresponds to the functional unit of canonical voltage-gated cation channel superfamily. And especially domain 2, D2S4, is responsible for voltage sensing. It moves and depending in response to voltage change, and it opens the whole channel gate, activation gate. While in contrast, domain 1 is believed not to have voltage sensitivity, but has a PIP2 binding site instead. So as you can see here in this cryo-EM structure of TPC1, PI35P2 molecule is bound close to the VSD1 and no such binding site in VSD2. So PIP2 binding and voltage sensing together regulates the activation gate and regulates the permeation of the cationic ions. And there are 3 subtypes in TPCs, and they show the distinct response or sensitivity to the stimulant. In the case of TPC1, it is voltage and PI35P2 activated channel. And TPC3 was firstly reported to be a simple voltage-gated sodium channel without any PIP2 sensitivity. But our group has shown that it can sense the PI34P2 molecule. The binding of PI34P2 shifts the voltage dependence from here to here, so it potentiates the voltage dependence. So now we can say that all the TPC subtypes have the phosphorinositide sensitivity. TPC2 is a little bit peculiar type of TPC. This was firstly recognized as the PI35P2 activated channel without voltage dependence. So this was characterized as a simple ligand-gated channel. But 2019, this group has shown that this drug can induce the voltage dependence. So as you can see here, it shows a clear voltage dependence, which this drug is desipramine. This is a type of antidepressant and made not for this drug. This is identified as a screening. So the detailed mechanism are still unknown, but in the presence of this drug, TPC2 become voltage dependent. This is a little bit, funny. So anyway, all the 3 TPC subtypes have been solved using the cryo-EM structural analysis, and they show, in principle, similar architecture. So the remaining question is, and the open question is, how these different responses can be achieved in the backbone of similar architecture. So to address this question, we investigated these two molecules which have the distinct activation mechanism in the genopath oocyte expression system to find the commonness and difference in the molecular level. So firstly, I will talk about the TPC2. So here is a representative current traces elicited by PI35P2 and desipramine, in this case without PI35P2. So you can see the non-voltage dependent current here and a clear voltage dependent current. So what causes this voltage dependency? Anyway, this is voltage dependence. So I firstly think about the contribution of D2S4. Although it was believed D2SO doesn't move at all. So to investigate the hypothesis, I use the double system mutation strategy. So here is a cryon structure of VSD2 in TPC2. So you can see the two asparagine residue in helix S2, D2S2 and D2S4 formed hydrogen bond, asparagine 473 and 548. So they are closely located to each other. Then I replaced these two asparagine residues with cysteine and applied the cadmium to conditionally stabilize or this conformation or to stop the movement of D2S4. So here's the result. I applied the desipramine with ridazole, which is a sort of booster to increase the current amplitude of the desipramine-induced current. And you can see here in the Y-type and single system mutant, desipramine-induced current, desipramine-induced current amplitude, but the subsequent cadmium application doesn't show anything. And in the case of double system mutant, desipramine-induced current was greatly reduced by the application of the cadmium chloride. So now we can understand. Even though this only have two positively charged residue for voltage-dependent activation, it can still move, but it happened only in the presence of this desipramine. This is ramp pulse, but I just used a ramp pulse protocol, but this is voltage-dependent. Desipramine-induced voltage-dependent current. So how about the PIP2-induced current? So I checked, I used the same procedure for two PIP2-induced currents. Of course, the molecule is the same in this double system mutant. And in the absence of cadmium chloride, PR35P2-induced current was observed. Even in the presence of cadmium, PR35P2 current was observed in the similar level in the current amplitude with a case in the absence of cadmium chloride. And statistical analysis showed there was no difference between the two cases. So we can say now the PIP2-induced current was not affected by this stabilization of this conformation. So this is different from the case of the desipramine-induced current. So from these data, I think we can say that TPC2 can be opened by two modes. So one is the voltage gating mode. Possibly the coupling of D2S4 and pore domain could be destroyed or decoupled. And the binding of the desipramine recover this coupling, and the voltage-dependent gating can be recovered and observed. Distinct from this mechanism, PIP2 gating mode exists. In this case, the D2S4 is fixed in this conformation, but just the binding of PR35P2 to domain 1 open the activation gate. So this seems to be true in TPC2. So then next question is, how these two mechanisms are equipped in one TPC2 molecule. So to address this question, we moved on to TPC3, which is predominantly voltage dependent, and compare the result with the TPC2 to see the commonness and the differences. To analyze comparatively TPC3 with TPC2, we focused on the residue pairs corresponding to the two asparagine residue that forms hydrogen bond. So in the case of TPC3, this is phenylalanine 540 in D2S4 and glutamate 447 in D2S2. So as glutamate 447 is a negatively charged residue, I just simply introduced arginine mutation into phenylalanine 540 to stabilize this conformation and to stabilize this conformation. What we observed in this mutant in the presence of PI34P2 was the additional open component in the hyperpolarized membrane range. And this is distinct from the second component, which is similar to the wild-type normal voltage-dependent activation component. You can see the channel opening even at minus 60 millivolt holding potential, and even at minus 100 millivolt channel can be open and closed. So there is an additional component. And another one interesting finding is that this first component is strongly dependent on the PI34 binding in the domain 1. So you can see here, in the absence of PI34P2, the first component is clearly lost. But the second component just shifted the voltage dependence, but exists. And this shift of the voltage dependence is similar to the case of wild type because PI34P2 has the potential to modulate the voltage dependence in wild type. So it can be expected, but it is unexpected. So anyway, this shows two steps of activation in this mutant. So we expected that even in wild type, the D2S4 moves atypically compared with the classical voltage-dependent voltage sensor movement in other channels. So we use a voltage clamp fluorometry technique to track the movement of D2S4. So I attached the RX488 fluorophore at the top of D2S4 and measure the fluorescence and the current simultaneously. The fluorescence should reflect the movement of D2S4. So this is a current Q507C mutant labeled with alexamalamido. And this is the GB relationship. It seems to be normal or typical. But fluorescence is atypical. So they showed two types of fluorescence change. At minus 100 millivolt, from minus 100 millivolt, its fluorescence was decreased fastly at minus 40 and plus 30, and then increased at plus 90 and plus 200 millivolt. So in the plot, you can see the decreasing F1 component and the increasing F2 component. At constant voltage of plus 90 millivolt, you can clearly see the two components. So current increase exponentially, but the fluorescence showed fluorescence is accompanied with the decreasing F1 component followed by the increasing F2 component. So this is interesting, and there are many points actually that can be discussed. But one simple and clear thing that we can insist is there should be the intermediate state between the resting and the activated state in D2S4. So, if we compare the fluorescence F1, F2 in Q507C as wild type, and compare the current for F514R, you can see that correspondence between them. So F1 component appears in the voltage range where the first component current appears. And the F2 component appears where the range second component appears. So it is natural to think that the first component, first component reflects the channel opening in the intermediate open state, and the second component reflects the activated open component. But this is a comparison of two constructs, and the first component was not fully stabilized. So we next used this mutant to further stabilize the intermediate state and to prevent the further voltage D2S4 movement to reach to the activated open state, and measure the fluorescent and current simultaneously. So here is the result. This is the current from E447R, F540. So this is the stabilization is due to the repulsion between two positive charge residue. It is expected to stop at the intermediate state and no further movement. So this is current, this is the fluorescent. Now you can see only the fluorescent decrease and no fluorescent increase. So you can only see the decreasing F1 component and no F2 component in plot. So at this point, we can say the F1 reflects the movement entry into the intermediate state and reflects the first component, so intermediate open channel component. And F2 reflects the entry into the fully activated state and second component of channel opening. And another important finding is that this E447R F540E showed a strong PI34P2 dependence. So in the absence of PI34P2, the channel current was almost completely lost. This is a great contrast to the case of wild type. In the absence of PI34P2, wild type shows a shift of the voltage dependence, but the channel current itself can be measured. But the plot shows that this is lost, and the plot shows the voltage dependence became much more gentle, so which means less voltage dependence. But the current is strongly PI34P2 dependence. So now I think this mutant behaves as a ligand-gated channel. So PIP2, it's become much more like the PIP2-gated channel. So I will summarize the result about TPC3. Normally, wild type D2S4 moves fully activated open state, and so this is the voltage gating mode. But if the intermediate state was stabilized by this mutation, it behaves as the PIP2 gating mode, a PIPS gated channel, because PI34P2 is strongly required for channel opening. So from this cartoon, we insist that the PIP2 gating mode is equipped as an intermediate state, PIP2 dependent intermediate state. And this is really corresponds to the case of TPC2 because this intermediate state was originally stabilized in the hydrogen bond between the D2S2 and D2S4. So I think we can say that TPC2 was originally tuned for PIP2 gating mode. So then it behaves as a PIP2 gated channel. Through unknown mechanism, dyspramic binding might destabilize this interaction and allow the D2S4 movement. So that might be the mechanism for switching PIP2 and voltage. So here the conclusion. The important finding is here is that there is an intermediate state that behave as that can be said as a hidden command for PIP2 gating in this TPC voltage-gated ion channel. If the channel is stabilized in this intermediate state, it can become PIP2 gated channel. And if this mode is predominant, it behaves as a TPC, a voltage-dependent channel. I thank you for the Professor Kubo and Dr. Hiraza for the contribution of this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Takushi. Any questions? Yes, please.
That's very interesting story. The PIP2, that 3-4 PIP2 for that TC2, right? The channel. TPC2 channel?
TPC3. 3-4 is for TPC3.
Yeah, so in your cartoon, it seems like the 3-4 PIP2 binds to the same site as 3-5 PIP2 site. So why in that channel you have to use the 3-4 PIP2 and also the distribution of 3-4 and 3-5 in the cytos, in the plasma membrane and in the intracellular organelle membrane. What are the content ratio? Can you illuminate those things?
Thank you for your question. And I think the potential to have PI342 sensitivity in TPC3 is, I think, due to the difference in the PIP2 binding site. In the previous study, I mutated these residues and found that in the mutant, it's lost the PI342 sensitivity. And here, there are some positively charged residue, but the details are a little bit different. And responsive residues are also different. So TPC3 can respond to PI342, but not TPC2. That is due to the difference in the cluster of these residues, I think. And the second question is the localization of PIP2 molecules. And PI342 is mainly localized in plasma membrane or the basically close to the plasma membrane. So then PI342 can target to the TPC3. And PI352 is mainly localized endosome or the lysosome. So they are correspond to the PIP2 and the TPC type are corresponding. Matches.
Okay, Anna?
Thank you. Very nice story, but I was wondering, when you are identifying with the fluorescence this intermediate state, do you also see in the current some signs of this? I mean, in the kinetics of activation, you should be able to see some indication that there are this slow activation process. Do you see this?
You mean the correspondence or matchness between the current and the fluorescence?
Yeah.
Difference. Okay, thank you. So this is a little bit complicated. So this one is fine. So actually, this is a comparison of the current and the fluorescence. And in the presence of PI342, the current is faster than the F2 component. So yes. So it indicates the current is generated before the reaching to the F2 generated. So this is supporting data for the F2. Not F. But that's not the case. I'm sorry. So this does not match well about our findings. So we have to think about a different model to explain this. And actually, we need another intermediate state to explain this. So, but I just cut for the time. Yeah, this behaves like that.
Thank you for, sorry. One last question, short one, please.
Okay, so I'm Byung-Chang Soo from Digital. Quick question about the PIP2 regulation again. So there are 34 and 35. Actually, it's a big difference in the structures. So why did channels show that one has affinity for PI34, the other is 35? Can you say about what's the difference in the structure or interactions?
You mean how the channel discriminate the PI34B2 and the PI35B2? Or
yes, that's correct.
And actually saying in the case of TPC3, they respond both. TPC3 can respond both PI34B2 and PI35B2. And I think so the TPC3 is a sort of loose recognition for the PIP2 molecule. TPC2 can selectively recognize PI35B2, but the TPC was not the case. But mainly expressed in the plasma membrane, TPC3 is mainly expressed in the plasma membrane. So the main molecule is a PI34B2 for TPC3.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, from the interest of time, I'd like to close this session. And I'd like to thank all four speakers for beautiful presentations, and also thank the floor for active discussion. So thank you very much.